Hello, my name is Tara Welling, and today I'm going to talk to you. This is a part two of the previous post, the previous recording that I made. This is part two of that recording. Now, as I ended that recording with a description of Gene Roddenberry turned the Temple of Caesar to the Temple of Venus, up the bridges to onto the Domus Aurea, the Domus Julii on the Palatine Hill to as you're looking at it from the Capitoline Hill toward the Villa Hill in the middle of the Forum, to the right up to the top of the Palatine Hill to the Domus Julii, up to the left. Those bridges would have connected to the Imperia Fora. Forward bridges connected between the top of the Temple of Venus to the City of Pillars. From another bridge from the City of Pillars that used to be where the Colosseum is now to the Palace of Claudius, and then a bridge from the Palace of Claudius to the Domus Julii. That forms a ship. That forms the Enterprise. Fictionally, of course, that's what Gene Roddenberry saw when he saw those buildings and studied those buildings and the architecture and the associated information from that. But those buildings were a part of a carefully constructed infrastructure of information that actually launched, in part, this very information, uncoding this very, very detailed, very basic, the footers of the Renaissance. This is where the information for the footers for the Renaissance came from. These collection of buildings: Caesar, Julii, Imperia Fora, Temple of Venus, Temple of Caesar, the Colosseum. Those buildings are the cusp of what launched the Renaissance, because finding out what those buildings are is the entire point to both Christianity and the Renaissance. Because those buildings, Gene Roddenberry saw those buildings and saw a ship, a starship. Well, if you hadn't noticed, the people think that when the rapture comes and Jesus comes back, that he's going to absorb his followers into himself as the ship, the structure. They're going to be resurrected into the soul, into the spirit, into the body of Jesus, and then he's going to fly you to heaven. Well, this is that. These buildings are the ship of that. These buildings, now, the Julii family built all of them but one, and the ones that weren't built by Julii were modified by Claudius. The Temple of Caesar was obviously built about this time. At least the first version of it was built between Augustus, Tiberius, and Claudius. That's when the Temple of Caesar was built, modified, remodeled, and then rebuilt again. The Julii family had been in charge of the Temple of Venus since day one, back when it was the previous three versions. The first one, that was, the temple has been in the same place, it's just not at the same elevation, because the Romans keep cutting off, keep re-leveling the Temple of Venus, the Villa Hill. They keep re-leveling it and then knocking off a multitude of feet off the top of the building, and then putting the Temple of Venus back where it was, although in different sizes and shapes based on the prevailing winds of the theocracy of the Roman Empire. Then there's the built by Julius Caesar, the Imperia Fora, and it's built by the Julii family and rebuilt several times by the Julii family, the Domus Julii, and the City of Pillars that was where the Domus Aurea was, which was destroyed, dismantled, and rebuilt into the Colosseum. That's the Enterprise, but it's also architecturally, it is the body of Jesus, and interaction in dealing with that specific collection of temples and buildings that has a lot to do with both the resurrection of Jesus as well as the return of Jesus during Armageddon. These buildings have a lot to do with that. Specifically, the interactions and connections with the City of Pillars, because the City of Pillars, IWNW, was in Egypt, and Caligula had the city of IWNW, and its sister city Heliopolis moved from Egypt to Rome proper, well, just outside, and rebuilt the buildings, rebuilt those buildings into, and shored up and rebuilt Rome from those buildings from Egypt. It can be defined and stated that Heliopolis actually translates to Jerusalem, but that's another video. This information is the building. The Gene Roddenberry created the Enterprise fictionally out of these buildings, but he's not the first artist. So if you walk from the temple, the Arch of Titus toward the Colosseum, you are literally walking in the shadow of death, because that's the shadow of the Colosseum. If you walk that direction, and then there was a staircase to the Temple of Venus off to the north. If you walk up that staircase, that's where Dante started his story of the Divine Comedy. You walk up the spiral staircase, which is kind of woodish in nature and nature-ish and tree-like. You walk up there and then enter the Temple of Venus, which at that point was 150 feet above where the floor is now. There was a moat, pond-ish there, which Dante semi-described, but semi didn't describe. That would be the river Styx, or at least semi-sort of the river Styx. Copies of this design are in most upper-end villas, where you have a platform and then a moat-ish around that platform. Well, that's with water anywhere between a couple of inches and 6 to 8 inches, maybe 18 inches, depending on what each of the residents wanted. If they wanted a shallow pool, or they wanted an actual, not a wading pool, because you really can't wade in 18 inches, but you can have fish and that kind of stuff in that 18 inches of water. You can have fish in just a few inches of water, but it's not exactly a comfortable or wide life. So you have that same basic design from the Temple of Venus in millions of examples, if not several millions of examples over the course of 1,500 years. In that specific room, you had a raised platform and water around, which, by the way, happens to also be the definition of the word Viking. A raised platform and a shallow inlet. That's metaphorically identical to the word Viking. It doesn't specify what kind of a shallow inlet. It just says a shallow inlet. Now, whether or not that's the mouth of a river, or the mouth of a stream, or it could be a lagoon, it could be a cove, it could be a bay, it could be any kind of inlet. It also could be a small pool, that raised platform with a small pool around. So the Vikings could actually be named for that room and that architectural structure, which is copied from the Temple of Venus. Things become interesting when you break things down to what they actually are, instead of what the propaganda wants you to believe. So Dante did the boat journey in that little Viking thing, and then went upstairs, and then did a small upstairs thing, and then did a little bit with and Masons will recognize the sequence perfectly. They go around in the water, in a moat type thing, and then that would be walking around the raised platform. And then you go up the stairs, and then you learn a bunch of stuff, and you do a bunch of other stuff, and you learn a bunch of stuff, and then you come across a spiral staircase. And on that spiral staircase, people are standing in that spiral staircase. There's things going on. Now each of those people has a representation of a kind of thing. There's definitions for these things. You get up, then you get to the third floor, and then you take a journey. On the third floor, you experience some stuff, and then you take a journey, and then that journey actually takes you into literal hell. Well, if you're on the go up that walking from the Arctitis toward the Colosseum, you're literally walking. If it's early in the morning, you're literally walking in the shadow of death. The sun comes up from the east, and the sun shines through those arches, those windows, those doorways, those gateways, those janus, to down the Amber Road, which is what you're walking on. And then you go up, and then the moat, the boat trip, the Sphinx, the Styx, the River Styx thing, up to the next, which would be the FC, and then up to the next, which would be the Amhena, and then across the bridge to the Colosseum. Then you deal with the whole Janus situation of looking backwards and such. The church wants you to look forwards, and these people want to look backwards. Well, that's Janus. East and west faces of Janus. The east face is implied. The west face is actually present. Then you go through the different stages and different layers of hell. Then you cross from hell, which would be the Colosseum, to the neutral area. Well, in the neutral area, that's the bridges from the Colosseum or whatever. It's three things. Same land was used for three things, and it appears that symbology is part of Dante's story. You have heaven, for lack of a better description, heaven with the city of pillars that was where the Colosseum is now. You have the Domus Aurea that was the palace for Nero, who also wanted it to. There's also some statistical evidence that says that Nero was at the same time Paul, and Paul was trying to create his own church that rivaled the Church of Jesus, Simon Peter, and his church actually won because he was more willing to commit mass murder and genocide than anybody else was, and he had the troops to be able to do it. And so then you cross over to the middle ground, and that middle ground would be the bridge between the Colosseum and the Palace of Claudius. Why was it so difficult to get those out of my words? Anyway, so you're looking at E, you're looking at the Colosseum, the circle. You're looking at the Colosseum. If you go to the left, south, if you go in that general direction, that area, you're the bridge between hell, Colosseum, and the Palace of Claudius. You're then entering what Dante wrote in his book, The Divine Comedy. You're entering purgatory, the middle ground. You then go across, do adventures in that building, and on those grounds, and then you cross the bridge over to the Domus Julii, which would then be heaven. You do some other stuff in that area, then you cross the actually documented and in existence, and so some of the architecture is still in existence. The bridges between the Domus Julii back into the upper floor, the upperest floor of upperest. Wow, what is that word? The top floor of the Domus Julii, the Temple of Venus, and you've now completed a circular journey. That's the metaphoric journey from a person to an initiate, to an EA, to an FC, to a Mason. Their journey as a Mason through the chairs, metaphorically changed Dante's pit to horizontal chairs. Each ring of hell would be a different chair. You get through the chairs, and then you get to pass through hell up to the medium ground. That'd be that would be the palace of Claudius, and then you go pass through from the palace of Claudius to the Domus Juliae. There's a lot of metaphors and a lot of interesting things going on with these facts and evidence and documentation, and that journey would be the journey of Christ. Now, something important to understand is that there's no reason to believe the Roman Empire when they said that they killed Jesus the second time, or the fact that he left the earthly plane to go to heaven. Well, his enemies wrote that. The people who were devotees of Paul, not Simon Peter, wrote that, and then backed it up with a whole lot of violence and a whole lot of really big armies that informed everyone. By the way, ours is the only voice available, allowed, and if you say anything or show us your paperwork, we will kill you and burn it. So we are in charge, and that's the way it's going to be. And just get used to it, because we'll happily kill you. We'll let you live as long as you don't bother our power grab. But if you bother a power grab, we will kill you. So the path of a Mason is built into these buildings. The path that what Dante was describing was built into these buildings. Now, if you add the Bath of Titus, that was actually commissioned and built by Claudius, but it was name changed a few years later. If you put in the middle, the portion of the most important portion of the Bath of Titus, draw a line to the most important portion of the temple, the palace of Claudius, over to the most important portion of the Domus Juliae, back over to the western portion of the Temple of Venus. You connect those four points. Those 4 points make a perfect square, which Masons around the world should be paying attention to. That makes a perfect square. That perfect square creates both the worshipful masters. There's 4 squares make it, the 4 squares make a square, and then the journey is the circle around that square. Have it complete the journey between those 4 buildings, between the 4 buildings, with the Colosseum, with the Colosseum included, not necessarily the Bath of Titus, included that together, and that's the worshipful master's 360-degree symbol, the past master. Complete the whole thing, and that's a bigger journey that can be and needs to be talked about and discussed. Thank you very much for watching the video, and more to come. And I'll please like this video and subscribe to my channel.